built a sawmill. When I started this project, I had very little understanding of how a sawmill works, but now I'm in the future and I can tell you this thing freaking works. This is a series where I go over every step I took to build this, so that by the end of it, you'll know everything I know. This video is about the safety guards and housing. Hey, welcome back to the mill build. Today I'm going to be working on the housing that covers up the wheels and the blade. That way, if the blade breaks, it won't hit people, it'll just hit the housing. That's the idea. Also, it's going to keep everything nice and contained so that there's no pinch points or anything. So I'm going to be working on the housing, and I'm going to be working on some sort of a blade guard as well. Not sure exactly how that's going to look yet, but we'll work on that when we get there. So, let's get started. The majority of this housing is going to be made out of plywood. Fortunately, my plywood storage leaves something to be desired. All right, that's it. This doesn't work. This is getting moved. Unfortunately, I can't move that right yet because the place where I want to put my plywood storage is actually where my mill is going to live until I'm done building it. This entire housing can be made out of one sheet of plywood, and so I started off by ripping this one right down the middle. One of those long pieces gets put aside for later, and then I can start chopping the other one down so that I can get the back of the housing on the left and the right side of the mill. While building a few machines in the past, I've come across this really interesting concept that if you're really careful about where you put your glue and brads versus your screws, you can make these removable, but you build them in place, and so it's really easy to get your sizing right. There's very little measurement involved. So I was able to start off by just cutting everything down into their approximate pieces and then taking them over to the mill and just sizing everything by eye. It was actually really easy. Anywhere I had straight lines, I could use a combination of the framer's square and a table saw to get the very straight lines. And I did leave my table saw blade a little bit high so I could get a very vertical cut at the end of this stop cut. I know some of you guys hate it when I do this. And then I could connect those two lines with my scroll saw. These inside cuts really don't have to be perfect, they just have to be outside of my yaw control mechanism. Now on the right side of the mill I have the engine to contend with, and so I had to make a little bit of a cutout to make sure that I had room for the belt and the pulley and the engine itself. And that was easy enough to cut out on the scroll saw. And you can see how this just is designed to slide in from the side. The right one is going to slide in from the right side, and the left one is going to slide in from the left side, and they're going to split in the middle. And the idea is I want to put as few screws in here as possible so I can remove this in the future. And right here I decided I wanted to cut the housing down to 45 degrees. To be honest, I'm not really sure what the reasoning is why all of the mills have this little chamfer on here, but I decided to add it on mine just because I think it looks really cool. To be completely honest, there's really no reason that this can't just be a square piece. This is one of those things where you can keep everything nice and 90 degrees if you want, and it is a lot easier to build, but there's something about just adding a little bit of an accent to the things that you build. In every single project, there needs to be at least one thing that is simply there just to be pleasing to the eye. And since this housing is so front and center, I figured that'd be a perfect place. Since the left side of the mill is so similar to the right, I can use the first piece as a template, making sure I don't cut away the piece for the engine. Other than that, they're just a mirror image of each other. So like I said, I'm not really going to be measuring any of this. Really, this is just a process of cutting everything to fit one piece at a time and then just gluing and brad nailing them together. I was cutting each of these boards to a 22.5 degree angle so that I'd have a perfect miter on these 45 degree angles on the faces. There was a lot of going back and forth just to cut all of these by hand because, like I said, I really didn't want to measure anything in this. And because I'm kind of picky about how this looks, I went back in and filled all of the gaps with glue and sawdust. Even though the glue and brads is probably strong enough to hold this whole housing together, I decided to put a little bit of reinforcement in each of the corners. My miter saw doesn't actually reach the angle that I needed to cut, and so I was able to cut the 22.5 degree off the corner of this, and then I found I could get 2 brackets out of each piece by just cutting them down the middle by eye. This third cut doesn't have to be anything specific. I could have made this any shape because this is the floating edge. And then after flooding this piece with glue, I could nail gun it into place. Now keep in mind, this video isn't actually sped up. This is just how fast I work when I'm excited to finish a project. Now I did go through and sand all of my seams to make them look real nice, but I'm going to skip right past that part. There we go, now we get to assembly. You can see how these just slide right around that engine and the wheel, and then they can both be clamped into place temporarily while I start working on the middle section that connects the left to the right. The center section has to be relatively robust because this is what everything is going to be hinging on, so I used two 2x2s to connect the left to the right. The front one just gets clamped into place and then screwed in through the top, and the back one is done basically the same way except it gets jammed into the corners. The trick here on the left side is to make sure that I'm using as few screws as possible to connect it, because the right side has the piece with a 2x2 on it and the left side is going to be a standalone section. Doing it this way just means I can remove this later when I want to, and I won't have to remove quite so many screws. I had to make this weird bracket on the engine side, otherwise I was worried that the front of the housing was going to be too heavy for this. On the back of each section of the housing, I put 4 screws in to hold it to the mill. So if anyone else is counting, I think I have 10 screws to remove if I want to remove the entire housing. I haven't actually done it yet, so I don't know, you tell me. Unfortunately, I miscut one of my pieces and I ended up having to find a piece of scrap in my scrap wood pile for this back section. This absolutely needed to be covered because this is where the top of the blade rides, and if I do get any kind of blade breakage in the future, this is one of the places where the blade's going to try and come out at the user, and I couldn't leave that open. Now it's finally time to put the front on the mill. And like I said, there's really no measuring involved. It's just a matter of putting the face on the mill and then just marking everywhere that I want to cut away. It's pretty straightforward, actually. Once I got this piece of plywood back down on the bench, I did use a couple of layout tools to make sure all of my lines were nice and straight and that sort of thing. And then I just cut everything out by eye with a circular saw. Unfortunately, this piece was a bit too large to put on my scroll saw. You know, it occurs to me, I actually have purpose-built sawhorses for this kind of work, and I never use them. I guess I never feel like I have space. Probably because I built my workbenches so big. And I can go ahead and throw the front back on the mill, and I'm just going to clamp this into place so that I can put some hinges on there. And I know I'm going to annoy some people again by doing this, but I have a bunch of these door hinges, so I just threw 3 of those on the top. People really don't like the way this looks, but they work so well and they're really robust. Also, I still have a box full of these things. I got them for free maybe a year or 2 ago from my parents-in-law. I don't know where they got them from, but they just gave them to me one day, so I use them on everything. If I was going to buy a hinge, I would probably buy something like a piano hinge. I think it would look a little nicer, but these are free. I'm gonna use them. On top of that, I had these brass latches that match the hinge. Nice. Now this was a full day's work, and this is the first time where I was starting to notice it's looking like a real mill, and I was getting a little overwhelmed here. I love the way this thing is turning out. I am so excited. The last piece I needed to make was a cover for the belt. I wanted this belt guard to be completely removable and separate from the rest of the pieces, so I'm sort of doing the same thing I did for the housing. Everything that needs to be removed is going to be attached by screws, and everything that does not need to be removed is going to be glued and brad nailed in place. This first piece here is the base, and it's what everything else is going to get glued to. Once again, I could have just easily made this a square box, but I decided to try and follow the curve of the belt and pulley. Partially because I think it looks cool, but also partially I had to make sure that I left enough room in here because I am actually thinking about upgrading this engine in the future. 3 horsepower is a lot unless you're talking about a mill, in which case it's definitely underpowered. This curve doesn't have to be anything specific, it just has to, like I said, flow somewhat nicely, so this first piece is just kind of eyeballed. And then I needed to make a couple more pieces that would flow along the inside ridge. I can use the first piece as a template for the outside, and then I just sort of drew an arc on the inside that matched it. And that gets multiplied 4 times. And then from this point, everything just gets glued and brad nailed together. And then I can clean up all the rest of this nonsense on the inside by just smashing some sawdust in there and getting it into all those grooves. And then I can clean everything up on the disc sander. I think it's officially time to change that sandpaper. And now that everything is sanded, I can attach the bottom, and this piece is done. And there it's done. And to be honest, I'm a couple of weeks ahead of you guys, so I have used this a couple of times and it actually works amazing. I haven't had any issues and the belt is completely protected. I feel so much better with having this on there. Thank you so much for watching. This is one of my favorite projects I have ever done. I am absolutely beaming over here. This is fantastic. I love the way this thing is turning out, and so far it's functional. So in the next video, I'm gonna be building a gantry. Should I build the tracks too? I'm gonna try and build the tracks in the next video too, and that way this thing can actually be up and running, and I think I can do a test cut. Nope. Yeah, I can do a test cut. No, you can't. There is actually one more thing that I need help from you guys. Let me know in the comments what I should do. I have this giant blank canvas here, and I don't know what to do with it. I thought about painting it, I thought about staining it. I don't really want to stain it, I don't think that'll look good. It needs something, like a design or a mural, or I don't know what it needs. It needs something. It's blank and it's boring and I need something. My channel colors are black and red, and I got that symbol, my question mark symbol that I thought would be kind of cool there. I could paint that on there, but it just seems too dull. I need something, I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think I should do. I'd love to hear what you guys think I should do. And if you're in my area and you have an idea that you would like to help paint on this, I would love to hear that in the comments as well. Well, thank y'all for watching. Catch y'all next time.